Family, how are we? It's so good that even though we are distant from one another, even though you're probably on a couch and still in your PJs or eating breakfast or you got your favorite cup of coffee, or maybe you're at a park, maybe you're just out and about and social distancing, of course. But hey, we just want to say welcome. We're glad that you're here and we get to do this together. Did you realize that maybe just over a year ago, I don't know the date exactly, but this wasn't even a possibility. And so just to be able to breathe in this morning and kind of lean in, kind of acknowledge strange days. I have a bag of onions here because if you were with us Wednesday, I mentioned how onions just are disappearing all over the place. And I walked into the office the next day and Sharon Hopkins had dropped off 3 onions for me. And here's what I want to do, something fun, okay? Something fun but serious, because there's no onions. So it's serious, people. I have 3, I only need 1. And maybe just as an example of our posture as a church family, I'd like to give the other 2 away. So here's how it works. The first 2 people to type onion in the lobby right now, we will deliver an onion to you, contactless, of course. Contactless, because we're making sure we're safe. But we will deliver one to you. So onion in the lobby, go, and you will get one of the 3. We'll give 2 away, and I'll keep 1, because I only need 1. So, but Sharon, thank you. That's super fun. And just, y'all, we're in strange times. We're receiving onions because there aren't any. And I don't know if you've been to In-N-Out or Starbucks or anywhere recently, whether it be local, whether it be a chain, whatever that looked like, but odds are you're not sitting down, right? Odds are you get there and they're like, hey, can you, as soon as you can, would you get out? Because we like you being here, but then we don't, because we don't want to catch what you got. So if you go to get a cup of coffee, it's like it's pushed across and everybody jumps back for a second and then you get it. But it's strange times and we're in them and we're all in it together. Some of you may, like my house, I got college girls home now, as well as we just found out there's another 2 weeks of school being out. And so just the realities that we're facing is that things are getting crazy. And so for us, we're all cooped up in the same space. We know we love each other, but there are times when it can get a little much. You're in each other's space for that many hours. And so we're just recognizing that you're probably in the same boat we are and in the same realities we are. And so just kind of acknowledging we're all in it together. We're in it as a family and we get to do this together. We're just excited for the church still being able to gather in homes all over, including outside of our state, including outside of our country. Just special times that we get to do this. Today, we want to rally around this conversation of fear, right? Fear is natural. Fear is something that, and the reason I know fear is natural is that I have girls at home. And these girls, I don't know if you've ever seen girls with spiders, but we got girls and we got spiders. And so it's common in my house that all of a sudden out of nowhere, you'll hear a scream from upstairs. And the other day I went up there and it's my 18-year-old. And she comes down and she's like, I think I killed it. And so I go up there and we're looking and there's still like even more serious than the fact that she's screaming about a spider, she used toilet paper to kill it. That is like gold right now to kill a spider. So anyway, she's got toilet paper and she goes, did I get it? And so I'm looking through this toilet, there's no spider. And now she's like, I am not gonna take a shower. I am not gonna, and so she braved up and went to it. But fear is natural, and it's interesting how we forget sometimes and how fear kind of creeps in. I was showing my 6-year-old, we have a video of when she was like 3, I think it was, but she is playing with a spider. She's not scared of the spider. She's playing with it, following it across the floor, and I think at some point she takes care of it. I don't remember if she killed it or not, but she was playing with it. It's so cute, and now at 6, she's scared of spiders until she saw the video reminding herself, hey, I can do this. I can play with the spiders. But fear is natural. Fear is natural. And I guess the conversation just kind of leaning in today and kind of wrapping around this idea. I'm personally annoyed And so I'm gonna share some of my personal frustration with the church community at large. We are, how do I say it? I don't know if you picked up on the messages coming out, but often it's put this way, that it's faith versus fear. Or maybe another way is that and you might have seen it, that it's this idea that faith over fear. And the idea that I'm struggling with and I'm kind of fighting against is, it kind of makes it sound like that if you have fear, then faith can't exist. That if you are someone who is naturally in these days, and let's be honest, if you don't have fear on some level, and what I mean by that is we can easily throw out all the Christianese language wrapped around these ideas of man, God's got this, God's in control, and those are all true. But if I'm sitting watching the news, those numbers are a reality that I have to walk through. If I'm sitting watching the reality of what is happening in the economy, those are realities that I have to navigate and walk through. That if I'm watching my entire life for my kids be turned upside down, those are things that are easy to become fearful about. And I feel like one of the things I'm noticing, and one of the things we're going to talk about this morning is that fear and faith can't coexist at all. That fear is the enemy of faith. And I don't think that's what we find in Scripture. And I even down to, I mean, I don't know how you were, but growing up, there's that song, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? You know? And the way I learned it was this: who's afraid of the big bad wolf, the big bad wolf, the big bad wolf? Who's afraid? Sing along, I know you're at home. Of the big bad wolf, not I, not I, not I. Which I came to realize that's not necessarily true. I came to understand lately that the words to that song, the way I've been singing it, might not be what was originally intended. But here's the premise of this idea of I'm not scared. I'm not afraid. That fear is somehow bad and faith is somehow good. That fear and faith are on the opposite pages. And if you play out the story of the three pigs, they might have actually gained something by being aware of their fear. That they probably should have been afraid and analyzed where they were running for safety. That fear could have actually let them assess and let them step into a place of safety, make some changes. And so this morning, kind of rallying around a definition, if we can, to just kind of frame this thing up. That fear, by definition, is an unknown or an unplanned, if you like, moment and an expression. It's unpleasant. The fear is an unpleasant moment in my emotions, my feelings, that is caused by someone or something that I perceive to be dangerous and a threat that will cause pain to my life. And so there's this reality that there's this emotion that's being caused that's unpleasant, and it's coming from stuff around me. And in our context, in our case, it's not far. You don't have to go far to figure out that the idea that we would be under fear, that we would be experiencing unpleasant emotions. And my concern is this, that what I'm hearing is that we need to stuff those, throw out a quick cliche, and in throwing out the quick cliche, move on. The problem is if you don't walk through and we don't sit in the reality of what we have, and if we don't navigate the emotions, the unpleasant emotions that we're feeling that are caused by something, or something, in this case, a virus to our world, right? That if we don't walk into that moment, and we are not honest with it, and we do not carry it and do not feel it, that the faith that we say we're building and standing on, we may find can't sustain us through what we're going through. There's a story, if you have a Bible, there's a story, or you have a phone, or you have an iPad, or you're at home. Man, you got everything you need right there. In Luke chapter 8, we're going to be in Luke chapter 8. And in Luke 8, it says this in verse 40. Now, when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. Okay, so a little bit of context right out the gate with this. So right out the gate, we have a context set up that there's a crowd around Jesus. They press Jesus in, and inside of pressing Jesus in, there's a man named Jairus who comes, and he's a synagogue leader. Meaning that he would have been in the church of that time, in the Jewish culture, that he would have been the one, more than likely, we understand that he would have been the one to kind of organize the church services, that he would have been the one that he's on a board that makes decisions about the local church, and he's in touch with a much larger. So the belief is that Jairus was very high up within the church. Now, why is that important? Because he's got a faith system in place. The problem is that with his faith system, something isn't able to stand the fear that he's now sitting in. Now, I don't know who you're sitting next to. Hopefully it's somebody you like. Hopefully there's social distancing, but if it's somebody you like, you might be a little closer, you know what I'm saying? But whether you're a parent, whether you got kids, I got daughters, I got 4, so, you know, we could probably lose one. Just kidding. That was funny, but I don't know if it translates, so maybe it didn't. But do me a favor, if it does translate, you hit that emoji button, that little laughing one, and you just let the lobby know that it was funny and it translates, and I'll hear about it later. So anyways, back to the story. So within the story, there's a loved one. So you pick the person. If you're not a parent or you're not married, you got people in your life on some level, hopefully, that you love dearly. If you don't have anybody in your life you love, you call me. We'll be friends. So, but if you don't have somebody, or you can picture that somebody. Now, imagine that somebody is on the verge of dying. And I realize in the current context and culture that we're in, we don't have to go far to imagine scenarios. But in this case, Jairus, his daughter, is at the point of dying. And what I want you to get is this, that he is scared she is going to die. And this entire faith system that he has, where he's not just an attendee of that faith system, but this guy is integral to that faith system. He's looking at his faith system through the eyes of his fear and going, my faith system cannot sustain what is in front of me. My faith system cannot navigate the fear, because he's being honest with his fear. And his fear is leading him to action. What is that action? It says that he ends up fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, about 12, was dying. So what does he do? He gets at the feet of Jesus. He's pleading at the feet of Jesus. Why? Because in his world, and I wrote it down for you because I want to get it right. You ready? He is doing something he had never done because he was somewhere he had never been. Jairus is doing something he had never done. What was that? Go outside of his current faith system to this new rabbi, this Jesus, who claimed to be the Son of God. His fear motivated him to do something he'd never done because he was somewhere he'd never been. I wonder how many of us today, we sit in our house, we're watching what's going on, and there's this fear that's building inside of us. And I just want to give you permission. That fear may be one of the most healthiest things that you can can sit in right now. What do I mean by that? Because it may lead you to do something because you're realizing everything I've ever been doing, even though I've been going to church, even though I've been saying the right things, even though I have all the slogans, even though within those slogans, like I can quote verses and I can quick cliche come off with stuff. I'm going home and I'm sitting in a moment and I'm scared and what I'm hearing is faith and fear. You got to overcome. Here's the reality. You're free to step into your fear and own it. You're free to step into your fear and be honest with it. In fact, I would say this, that if you don't do that, you may find that the faith you're building on top may be hollow because you haven't stepped in and navigated that moment of fear. And for Jairus, there's a real moment here where Jairus is going, hey, my daughter's dying. I'm terrified. I'm going to lose her. I'm going to go and see this new rabbi. I'm going to do something that I've never done before. His fear motivated him to faith. As Jesus was on his way, the verse continues, the crowds almost crushed him. So the crowds are so tight on him, he's almost being crushed. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. And immediately her bleeding stopped. So within the story of Jairus, you have this moment where wait a minute, this woman comes out of nowhere, the crowd's pressed in. Something about this lady, right? We're told that she's been bleeding now for 12 years. And inside of that condition, and another place in Scripture that captures the same story, we're now told that she not only has been bleeding for 12 years, but the reality is she has been to doctor after doctor after doctor, exhausted her finances, and tried to figure this out and cannot figure it out. Okay, so now what that means in this culture is that she's unclean. The reality for her is she should be isolated. She should be practicing social distancing in our context. That not only is she unclean, but it means that religiously she can have no part in the religious system. The faith that would be of Jairus, that faith can't sustain what's going on in her world. And so what you find in this moment is you find this lady who begins to, how do you get through a crowd? She begins to push her way and pull her way through the crowd. And in this culture, in this context, I mean, it's like you've been at the supermarket. I was there the other day. I was at Fry's. God bless all of the workers at Fry's, by the way, and all the other grocery stores and all the first responders. Man, we are so grateful for those of you that go to work on our behalf. Thank you. But I was there and I was checking out. I'm in the self-checkout, right? And there's a moment where I cough, like it was out of nowhere, and I kind of cover up. And it's one of those where I'm like looking over my hand, like who saw me? And I kid you not, in the self-checkout, there were people at each one. They all stopped, looked, and it was like this second of unclean, you know what I mean? And then they carried on with their thing. And here's the thing. This is this woman. The way we feel about contact right now, this is how she should have existed all the time. The 6 feet was her life. That she was isolated, that she should have been isolated, and now she's breaking all of those norms. And she comes up to Jesus. And there's a belief that within the old scriptures, that what was tied in there, that in the very tassels that would have been on the rabbi's garment, there was healing in the tassels. And so she reaches down, and it's believed that she touches the hem of his garment, and immediately her bleeding stops. Well, what was her fear? Her fear was that tomorrow will be the exact same as today. Her fear was that this is the way life's going to be from now on. That I've tried everything and there's nothing left. That what I'm being told by experts is unsettling because they can't fix what's happening. And it's in the midst of that that she decides that the fear of life always being the same, never changing, this is the new reality. She steps in and she lets her fear motivate her. And even if I have to break the rules to get to Jesus, I'm going to step in and I'm going to move towards faith. The story unfolds a step further. It says, "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." In Matthew chapter 9, you have the same story captured for us, just in a different way. Matthew is writing to a Jewish group of people. The Jews would have believed that she was unclean. The Jews would have believed very specific things. The Jews also believed that there was this moment and a blessing that came when God turned his face towards you. And if you catch verse 22 of chapter 9, it says this, that she's just touched his cloak, and then it says Jesus turned and saw her. That Jesus turns and he sees her. That he physically turns his body towards her, and he physically looks at her. That God himself, while she feels shame, while she feels outcast, while she feels that she shouldn't be feeling the way she should, while she is scared, while she is breaking the rules, Jesus, God himself, turns towards her and meets her, and his eyes lock with her, and he sees her. Now, why is this important? I mentioned the Jewish rhythm had a belief, and it's found in Numbers. You don't have to turn there. But in Numbers 6, they had a blessing that they believed. And whenever they would gather in the morning, this blessing would be read over them. And it went like this: "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you." The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. The Lord turn his face toward you. What they would read over each other and what they would bless each other with, the priest would bless the people, is that God's favor is found when God looks at you. When his face is towards you, the favor of God is on you, and you are blessed. Now jump back to the story that no matter which version you read, Matthew catches God turning toward her. Luke, it ends up with them in this conversation. The key is this, that God's posture in the person of Jesus turned and saw her in spite of her fear, in spite of her mistakes, in spite of what she was doing in that. God looks at her, and what is communicated is the favor of God is on you. It carries on into a conversation. Then the woman, verse 47, Luke captures it this way. He's writing to a different group of people. "Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling." She came in fear. And fell at his feet. In his presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Wait. The blessing that they would read over people was that God's face would turn towards you and he will give you peace. In this story, her fear has motivated her to a step of faith she's never had. The step of faith is, I'm going to go into the group of people that I should be isolated, that I should stay away from, that I'm shamed by. I'm going to go into that group, and when I get in that group, I'm going to do something I've never done. Fear motivated her to faith, and what she found then was God's favor turning toward her. And as God's favor turns toward her, he says the words, "Go in peace." Any kids in the room? I've been talking a long time, and so if you're in the room, it's time to play with Legos. And I understand that this guy's name is Emmett. And so you can say hi to Emmett. Go ahead, say hi to Emmett out loud. It's kind of fun. But what I want to give you is just a picture. We've gone through 2 stories. And within those stories, fear has led to this moment of faith. Fear has been the motivator. Fear has been the vehicle. And so, for the sake of our conversation, Emmett, well, he drives a school bus. And Emmett's been driving a school bus for a while now. And all of a sudden, a couple of weeks ago, there was no need for him to drive a school bus. And so Emmett's become concerned. His fear level has started to build. And so this red is gonna represent fear that in Emmett's life has been building around him. That if unchecked, it's going to continue to surround him. And so Emmett now has to go home. And when he gets home, there's the news. And on their news, they're telling him it's going to be another 2 weeks. And Emmett's starting to do the math. And the math doesn't add up. And it would be easy for Emmett in this moment to just throw out, well, God's my provider. And that's true. But it's one thing to throw it out, and it's another thing entirely to believe it. It's one thing to throw it out. It's entirely another thing to walk through. But God, I have all of this unrest over the bills that I'm facing, over the realities that are now in my world. God, I don't know how ends meet, but I know you're my provider. You see, there's a different context there. Because we're so quick with answers sometimes that what we're trying to do is knock down the walls, but they continue to build because we haven't actually dealt with them. And so now Emmett's inside of this, and here's the reality that as this builds, if I have more Legos, I'd build it higher. If we're not careful, our fear, if we don't enter into our fear and we don't use our fear to motivate us, if we don't step into that moment, then what happens is our fear will build around us like a prison. And reality is when our fear builds around us like a prison, we start to do weird things like buy all the onions. Emmett runs out and he starts to buy toilet paper because he's just scared he's going to have some bowel movements. I don't know. But Emmett starts to do strange things like hoarding things he's never hoarded before in his life because he doesn't know how ends meet. And here's the reality. Emmett can stay in that space and build a prison around him of fear, or he can step into his fear and he can own his fear. And what actually happens when he begins to become honest, like the lady who came trembling at Jesus' feet, and she begins to tell him why she did what she did, all of a sudden what happens is instead of it becoming a prison, your fear begins to become a platform for faith. And as Emmett decides that instead of getting up in the morning and going straight to the news and stressing himself out, Emmett's just going to start leaning into the reality that he's going to trust God with what's ahead. And some of you who play Legos, you're probably like, man, you're really bad at this. I could do so much better. You probably could. You should do that and then send me a picture. But the reality of what starts to take place is as Emmett starts to navigate through his fear and process through, God, why do I feel the way I do? I'm scared that ends aren't going to line up. I'm scared that this isn't going to end. I'm scared that it's going to take the life of my loved ones. I'm scared that, and all of a sudden he begins to step into that fear and he begins to reload it with things that he knows that God, I know you're my provider, and now I get a chance to prove it. So God, instead of hoarding toilet paper, you know what? I'm just going to go to my neighbor and I'm going to give them some of it. You know what, God? Instead of worrying about where I'm at, I'm going to step out by faith and love somebody else in this time instead of being focused just on me. And before you know it, what happens is what could have been a prison of fear for Emmett has become a platform for faith that has taken him to spaces that he never knew he could reach and step into. You see, we have a moment in time where the reality is what surrounds us, and church, I feel it too. The concerns are real. What if this goes months? Family, how do we sustain a staff of our size? What if all of a sudden we can't even do this anymore? What does church look like? How do we encourage people? How do we step into one another's lives? What if my mom, whose health already isn't good, she gets the virus? You see, the fears are real. And I think if we try and ignore the fear because we think that's faith, we're standing on faulty faith. You see, what Emmett has is new circumstances which become new opportunities for faith. The lady had circumstances that became opportunities for faith. That her fear actually motivated, her fear actually led her to faith. The story continues. And she's told to go in peace. And then in verse 49, it says, while Jesus was still speaking, someone came to the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, he said. Don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. This is something we can catch about Jesus, right? That Jesus, in the midst of crisis, in the midst of the crisis of death, Jesus isn't fazed. He doesn't even blink. He doesn't stutter. He doesn't all of a sudden go, man, I got to have a counsel with God and figure out with the Father what's actually going on here. Instead, what you get in this moment is you get this beautiful moment where Jesus isn't fazed. Why? Because he knows resurrection is coming. He knows the power that God holds. And so in the midst of this news that could have sent him into a prison of fear, Jesus tells Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. Stop wailing, Jesus said. She is not dead, but asleep. They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned at once, and she stood up. Can you imagine being Jairus? That you had this whole faith experience over here, and fear has motivated you to go see this man claiming to be God. And in the midst, you begin to build a platform. You begin to build a platform of faith, and now Jairus stands on the top watching his only daughter come back to life. Now, I don't know where you are, but that deserves some kind of praise hands, some kind of amen, some kind of woohoo, some kind of like, I'm okay, it's going to be all right, because the Jesus who is there is the Jesus that is with you in your living room, on your phone, as you're walking, wherever you're listening. Jesus, the same Jesus that stepped in and isn't fazed by the crisis of death is not fazed today. And we have a moment we can step in and go, God, I'm scared. I can step into the fears and go, God, I don't know how this turns out, but I'm going to choose to push through and let my fear move me towards you. Y'all, I get it, man. I woke up yesterday and I decided I'm trying to, and I'd encourage you, like you got to take care of yourself in this season. And it sounds dumb because we say this all the time, like outside of church walls, but it's real serious that you take care of how you eat, you take care of your exercise, and you take care of your soul. I would highly encourage you to not wake up and turn on the news, but I encourage you to wake up and take my fear into the presence of God and see what platforms he builds of faith. Take my honest, come trembling, here's my why, it's selfish, and see what he does as a platform of faith. I woke up and I decided to exercise, and I got going, and I put on the news. And putting on the news, all of a sudden, just all these numbers and all this reality of what we don't have and how long this could last and whose fault it is. And it was the White House press conference. And I caught myself getting caught up. And as I got caught up, I began to analyze, God, what in here is real and what in here is designed to push me towards you? And maybe today, just as we close, maybe the question is like, what kind of platforms of faith does God want to build in your life through your fear? Because I think fear can be an amazing motivator to get us to step into faith. I think for some of you today, the reality is that you're going, I don't know if my faith can sustain. I don't know if my faith can sustain where I'm at. I don't know. I feel so overwhelmed that I feel like the prison's coming in of fear. And I just encourage you today, step through. Use it to lead you to faith. Press into and question, God, I feel this way. You say you're in control, yet I feel this way. Take that feeling and let it drive you through truth to faith on the other side. But let them work together to lead you to a new platform that God has for you. I want to pray for you, but I also I want to close a little bit differently today. And so I'll pray, and then I'm going to ask you to do something. God, we come before you this morning. The God who is not caught off guard by our fears. But God, instead, you want to lead us through the fears to a deeper, new platform of faith with you. Maybe a real faith for the very first time. And so, God, as we sit in all these different spaces, as we're sitting in this room with a handful of people and a bunch of cameras, as people are sitting in homes and this feels different, God, would your presence in this next moment, would your presence and your spirit wash over each and every person and each and every space that this sound of my voice is going into, but God, it's your people. God, would you wash over anyone who can hear it? God, would you bring comfort? Would they know that your face is upon them today? Would you let them know that you see them with eyes of favor today? Would you let them know that they are blessed because of you today, that in Jesus we have everything we need? Would you let them know, God, that you are gracious towards them today, that you are keeping them, that even though they may have real worries and concerns and are terrified, that God, you see them, you are with them, and you are near them. Would you encourage them today? In a different moment, you may be sitting here today and you may be going, man, I don't know if my faith is real. My fears seem to be overwhelming. And maybe for the first time, you're realizing your faith can't handle You're kind of like Jarius, you've been doing something and you're going, man, everything I've been doing isn't what's needed for where I am today. And for some of you, maybe that's the very first time you've ever stepped into faith with Jesus. And so I'm gonna ask you to do something that's a little bit strange for where we're all sitting. I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand in a moment if you would like to cross that line of faith today. If you wanna use your fear and going, I don't know, but I know I need to step towards God. I don't know, but I know I need to step towards Jesus. Real simple. God loved you enough that he sent Jesus to make a way that you could have eternal life. Eternal life is simply this, that you would have a relationship with him. What does a relationship do? Well, it means that when you step into faith, God's presence and God's Holy Spirit walks with you. That whatever you face, he walks alongside you. And so today, if you're going, man, I don't know where my faith's at. Then in a moment, I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand. Why raise your hand? Because I believe, and there's others that believe this in other spaces, but when you make a decision and you physically respond, it does something to your soul. It cements it for you. And so on the count of three, if you're sitting at home, if you're walking on a trail, if you're sitting somewhere else, isolating in your backyard, catching some sun, and you go, I need to step into faith today. On the count of three, I'm just gonna ask you to raise your hand wherever you are. And then I'll pray for you. 1, 2, 3. God, I step in today. Step out of my fear, and I'll let it lead me to you in faith. Let me pray for you real quick. God, thank you for those that in these moments have decided to step into faith. God, I pray that your presence would let them know that this is a real action that they've taken. That God, belief is the starting point. That from here, God, I pray that your presence would overwhelm them, that you would surround them, that you would bring peace, that they would know that your face is upon them today. That just like Jairus and this lady in the story, that they would know they found faith. And we celebrate that, God, in your name, amen. We're so excited for you. If that's you today, welcome to the family. If you want more information, you can talk to somebody in the lobby. We have some things, some ways, speaking of being connected, we want to stay connected. The best way to stay connected to us is through our update number. That number is simple. You just text update to 928-218-3111. 928-218-3111. Text update and you'll get put on our updates that we send out through text. That'll connect you to the website. But then also the website is a great way to stay in touch. One of the ways we're getting news out the fastest is through Facebook and social media. You can find us Heights Church AZ on those platforms. But church, we're here. We don't know what tomorrow looks like. It's moving so fast. We don't know. We may be here next week doing this. We may be sitting at home and having a cup of coffee doing this. We don't know what happens from here, but we do know this, that the church will not be stopped. We get to walk this path together. We're here. We love you. If we can serve you in any way, if you want a phone call even, let somebody know in the chat lobby and we will get a phone call to you this week and just keep connecting as we go. We love you. We'll see you real soon.